I've been debating whether or not to share this. Honestly, I'd rather forget it ever happened, but I can't. Every night when I close my eyes, I see him. I hear him screaming, begging for help I couldn't give. His face, his goddamn face, is burned into my mind, warped in pain and terror. This is the kind of thing that ruins you forever. I know it's already ruined me, but maybe writing it out will help. Maybe it'll warn someone to stay the hell away from places they shouldn't go. It started out as a joke, like these things usually do. My best friend Kyle was always the thrill seeker of our group. He lived for this kind of edgy shit, urban exploration, horror movies, escape rooms. He'd dive headfirst into anything that promised an adrenaline rush, no matter how sketchy it seemed. Me? I was more of the watch from a safe distance kind of guy. But Kyle had a way of dragging me into things. This time was no different. We were hanging out at his place, bored out of our minds, scrolling through Reddit and YouTube. That's when Kyle brought up the dark web. He said it like it was some big taboo secret, which I guess it kind of is. I'd always thought the dark web was just a playground for creeps and criminals, not something normal people like us should mess with. But Kyle? He was all in. "I found this thing," he said, leaning in like he was about to spill the juiciest secret in the world. "It's called the Gauntlet. It's some kind of dark web challenge. You sign up, do a bunch of tasks, and if you make it to the end, they pay you. Like a lot. We're talking tens of thousands, dude." "Sounds fake as hell," I said. Kyle grinned, his eyes practically glowing. "It's real. I've been reading about it on forums. People have done it. Well, some people. A lot of them don't finish, but that's because they're pussies. Or because it's dangerous. Dangerous, sure. But that's where the money comes from. High risk, high reward, right?" I should have walked away right then. I should have told him it was a terrible idea and left it at that. But Kyle had this way of making you feel like a coward if you didn't go along with him. Plus, I was broke, like ramen for every meal broke. The idea of a big payday, even if it was risky, sounded tempting. "What kind of tasks are we talking about?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing crazy, just like dares. You know, drink something gross, stay in a creepy place for a few hours, stuff like that. It's all psychological." Psychological. That word stuck with me later, because this wasn't about fear or bravery. It was about breaking you. The first step was finding the link. Kyle had a friend of a friend, one of those guys who's always posting edgy memes and bragging about his hacks. He sent us the invite code, a string of random numbers and letters, and a warning: "Don't screw around with this. Once you start, there's no backing out." Kyle thought that was hilarious. I didn't. We used a burner laptop, just like the forums said. Tor browser, VPN, the whole deal. When we entered the code, a plain black screen popped up with one line of text. "Welcome to the Gauntlet. Do you wish to proceed?" Kyle clicked yes before I could say a word. The screen went blank for a second, then another message appeared. "Participants, 2, confirm." Kyle hit confirm. I could feel my stomach drop. The first task came through almost immediately. It was so tame I actually laughed out loud. We had to eat something gross, record it, and upload the video. Kyle grabbed a can of wet cat food, mixed it with some spoiled milk, and downed it like a champ. I gagged my way through a spoonful of mayo mixed with hot sauce and raw eggs. Easy money, right? After we uploaded the video, the screen refreshed with task 2. It was simple. Spend the night in an abandoned house. Kyle's eyes lit up. "Dude, this is cake. There's that old place on Birch Road. Let's do it tonight." The house was a wreck. Broken windows, rotting wood, graffiti everywhere. It smelled like mold and piss, and there were used needles scattered in the corners. But it wasn't haunted or anything, just gross. We brought sleeping bags and some flashlights, planning to camp out in the living room. Kyle, as usual, was hyped. "This is nothing," he said, cracking open a beer. "They're probably watching us right now, laughing at how easy this is." I didn't say anything. I'd already started feeling uneasy, like we were being pulled into something we didn't understand. At 3 a.m., the next task came through. burn something you value. Kyle didn't even hesitate. He pulled out his wallet, grabbed a $50 bill, and lit it up with his lighter. Boom. Done. I wasn't so quick. I didn't have much to my name, but I did have a bracelet my mom had given me before she passed away. I sat there staring at it, my hand shaking. Kyle rolled his eyes. Dude, it's just a stupid bracelet. You're going to let that stop you? Think about the money? I threw it into the flames. The next morning we got the fourth task. This one was different. It wasn't a dare. It was a question. Would you hurt someone to win? Kyle answered before I could stop him. Yes. The screen changed instantly. Task 5. Prove it. That was when everything went to hell. We sat there in stunned silence, staring at the screen. Neither of us said a word. I could feel the air in the room shift, heavy, suffocating. The glow from the laptop was the only light, and it painted Kyle's face in this eerie blue hue that made him look off.
"What the hell does that mean?" I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Kyle didn't look at me. His eyes stayed glued to the screen as the details of Task 5 loaded. "Prove it. Retrieve the item at the following coordinates. Deliver it by sunrise. Failure to comply will result in disqualification." Below that was a set of GPS coordinates. Kyle grabbed his phone and punched them in. "It's not far," he said, his voice flat. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "What do you think we have to do?" Kyle shrugged. "Probably just grab something like, I don't know, a wallet or a bag or something." "You really think they're going to pay us thousands of dollars for something that easy?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I didn't want to follow him. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stop, to leave, to smash that damn laptop and never look back. But I followed him anyway. The coordinates led us to an old industrial park on the edge of town. The place had been abandoned for years, left to rot like a corpse in the open air. Rusted metal, broken glass, and graffiti were everywhere. It was the kind of place you avoided even in broad daylight. At night, it was like stepping into another world, a dead world. We parked the car and climbed through a hole in the chain-link fence. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but Kyle was already ahead of me, moving like he knew exactly where he was going. "This place gives me the creeps," I muttered. "Relax," Kyle said. We grabbed the thing and we're out. The GPS led us to a crumbling warehouse at the back of the lot. The doors were chained shut, but there was another hole in the side of the building, just big enough to crawl through. Kyle went first, and I followed, scraping my hands on the jagged edges of the metal. Inside, the air was cold and damp, and it smelled like oil and rot. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, illuminating piles of debris and rusting machinery. "Over here," Kyle whispered. I turned and saw him pointing at something in the corner of the room. It was a box, small, wooden, and covered in what looked like dried blood. "Nope," I said, taking a step back. "Nope, I'm not touching that." Kyle rolled his eyes and walked over to it. He bent down, hesitating for just a second before lifting the lid. Inside was a knife. It wasn't just any knife. It was big, serrated, and old, the kind of thing you'd see in a slasher movie. The blade was stained, and the handle was wrapped in black tape. Next to it was a Polaroid photo. Kyle picked it up and squinted at it. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. He handed it to me. My stomach turned as I looked at the picture. It was a man, middle-aged, balding, and tied to a chair. His mouth was duct-taped and his eyes were wide with terror. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. "What the hell is this?" I whispered.
The laptop in Kyle's bag dinged. We both froze. He pulled it out and opened it. The screen displayed a single sentence. "He's in the next room." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. My flashlight started to shake in my hand. "We're leaving," I said. "I don't care about the money. We're done." Kyle didn't respond. He was staring at the laptop, his jaw clenched. Kyle. He looked up at me, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. We can't stop now. You know what happens if we stop. No, I don't know, and I don't want to find out. He grabbed my arm, his grip hard enough to hurt. They're watching. They're always watching. If we quit now, they'll come after us. You've read the stories. I hadn't. Not really. But I'd heard enough rumors to know that people who backed out of dark web challenges didn't just walk away. Kyle stood up, holding the knife. We finish this. We moved deeper into the warehouse, following the faint sound of muffled cries. It led us to a metal door, half rusted and hanging crooked on its hinges. Kyle pushed it open and there he was, the man from the photo. He was tied to a chair, just like in the picture. His face was pale, streaked with blood and sweat. When he saw us, his muffled screams grew louder, desperate. I froze. My body refused to move. This couldn't be real. This kind of thing didn't happen in real life. Kyle, I whispered. We can't do this. We have to call the cops. Call.
Are you insane? Kyle snapped. You think the cops can stop whoever's behind this? You think they won't kill us for talking? He stepped forward, knife in hand. The man in the chair thrashed, his eyes bulging with panic. Don't, I said, grabbing Kyle's arm. Please don't! Kyle shook me off. His hands were shaking, but he moved toward the man anyway. I couldn't watch. I turned away, my stomach churning, bile rising in my throat. I heard the man's muffled screams turn into gurgles, then silence. When I turned back, Kyle was standing there, his hands and shirt covered in blood. The man's head hung limp, blood pooling on the floor beneath him. The laptop dinged again. Kyle opened it, his breath ragged. The screen displayed one word: approved. We left the warehouse in silence. The ride home was a blur. I couldn't think, couldn't speak. All I could see was the man's face, the way his body went limp, the sound of the knife tearing through him. When we got back to Kyle's place, I threw up in his sink. He didn't say a word, just opened another beer and sat down on the couch. The laptop dinged again. Kyle opened it, and a new task appeared. Congratulations, Task 6 will be sent shortly. Prepare yourselves. That's when I realized we were trapped. There was no way out, and I knew, deep down, I wasn't going to survive this. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to be alone, not after what had just happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the man in the chair. His eyes, full of fear, staring at me like I was the monster, like I could have stopped it. But I didn't. Kyle crashed on the couch, the bloody knife still sitting on the coffee table like some sick trophy. I sat on the floor in the corner, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the laptop. It was quiet now, the screen black, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. What are we doing, man? I whispered. My voice cracked, my throat dry and raw. Kyle didn't answer. He was slumped against the cushions, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't even bothered to clean the blood off his hands. They're not going to stop, are they? I asked. He sat up slowly, his face blank, emotionless. No. The next task came through at 5 a.m. The ding woke us both up. I'd been drifting in and out of a restless, nightmare-ridden sleep. Kyle had been snoring, but as soon as that sound hit, he snapped awake like a dog hearing a whistle. He opened the laptop, his face lit by the screen's eerie glow. I stayed where I was, too scared to move. Kyle read it out loud. His voice was flat, like he was reading the weather report. Task 6. Deliver the footage to the following address. Footage. My stomach churned. I hadn't even thought about it, but of course they'd recorded everything. They'd probably been watching us the entire time. There was an address below the message. It wasn't far, just a few miles from Kyle's place. They're keeping us local, Kyle said. He sounded almost relieved, like that made this whole thing less insane. We're not doing it, I said. I'm out. I don't care what happens. I'm out. Kyle turned to look at me, his eyes hollow. You can't back out. You think they'll just let you walk away? You think they won't find you? Let them find me, I snapped. Let them kill me, because I'm not playing their game anymore. Kyle stood up, towering over me. You think this is about you? If you quit, they're not just coming after you, man. They'll come after your family, your friends. You want to drag everyone you care about into this? I froze. My mom, my little sister. They didn't have anything to do with this, but Kyle was right. These people, whoever they were, weren't playing by normal rules. They'd already proven that. Get in the car, Kyle said. The address was in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It looked like any other house on the block. 2 stories, white siding, a well-kept lawn. There were even kids' toys scattered in the front yard, like some happy family lived there. This has to be a mistake, I said as we parked across the street. Why would they send us here? Kyle didn't answer. He grabbed the laptop, which now had a USB drive sticking out of it, and got out of the car. Wait, I said, scrambling after him. What's the plan? What if someone's home? They won't be, he said. How do you know? He just shrugged and walked up the driveway. The front door was unlocked. That should have been our first clue, but by that point, nothing felt real anymore. We stepped inside and the smell hit me immediately, a metallic, sickly sweet stench that made my stomach turn. The house was eerily silent. No TV, no voices, nothing. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Leave it on the counter, Kyle said, his voice low. He walked to the kitchen, set the laptop and USB drive down, and turned to leave. That's when we heard it. A noise. Faint, almost inaudible, coming from upstairs. I froze. Kyle froze. For a second, neither of us moved. Don't, I whispered. But Kyle was already moving, heading for the stairs. Stop, I hissed, grabbing his arm. We're not here for this. If someone's up there, then we leave! We did what they asked! We're done! Kyle shook me off and kept climbing. I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, my whole body trembling. I wanted to run, but something kept me rooted in place, like I had to see this through. The noise was louder now, clearer, a low, wet sound, like someone choking or gasping for air. Kyle reached the top of the stairs and disappeared down the hallway. Hello? He called out. The sound stopped. I stayed at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the darkness. Kyle? No answer. I took a shaky step forward, then another. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I forced myself to move. Kyle, I whispered again. I made it to the top of the stairs and turned the corner. The hallway was empty. The smell was stronger up here, almost overpowering. I gagged, covering my mouth with my sleeve. Kyle? I heard something, a door creaking open. I followed the sound, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. At the end of the hallway was a door, slightly ajar. A thin sliver of light spilled out into the hallway. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was a child's bedroom. The walls were painted pink, and there were stuffed animals piled in the corner. A small bed sat against the wall, the blankets rumpled and stained with something dark. And then I saw her. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. She was sitting on the floor, her back to me, rocking back and forth. Her hair was matted, her skin pale and covered in bruises. Hey, I said softly, stepping closer. Are you okay? She stopped rocking. Slowly, she turned to look at me. Her eyes. I'll never forget her eyes. They weren't human. They were black, solid black, like bottomless pits. Her mouth twisted into a grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged. Before I could scream, she lunged at me. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet and hitting the floor hard. The room spun, and when I looked up, she was gone. Kyle! I shouted, scrambling to my feet. I ran out of the room, down the hallway, back to the stairs. Kyle was standing at the bottom, staring at something on the floor. What the hell happened up there? he asked, his voice shaking. There's something in this house, I stammered. We have to go. Now. He turned to look at me, his face pale. We can't. Why not? He pointed to the living room. I followed his gaze and saw the body.
It was a man, tied to a chair, his throat slit, blood pooled around him, soaking into the carpet. On the wall above him, scrawled in blood, was a message, "You're next." We didn't wait to find out what that meant. We ran. We didn't stop running until we were in the car, and even then, Kyle didn't start the engine right away. We just sat there, gasping for breath, trying to process what we'd just seen. "What the hell was that?" I finally managed to choke out. Kyle didn't answer. He was gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His face was pale, his eyes wild. "Kyle," I said, louder this time. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't fucking know." I looked back at the house, half expecting to see something, or someone, watching us from the window. But the place was dark, still, like nothing had happened. "We're done," I said. "I don't care about the money. I don't care what they do to us. We're done." Kyle laughed, a harsh, broken sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You think it's that simple? You think they'll let us just walk away?" "They have to," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "We did what they asked. We delivered the footage. We're done." He shook his head. "You don't get it. This isn't about finishing the tasks. It's about breaking us." When we got back to Kyle's place, the laptop was waiting for us. The screen was already on, a new message glowing against the black background. "Congratulations, you've completed task 6. Prepare for task 7. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I'm not doing this anymore." Kyle ignored me, his eyes locked on the screen. "Task 7, clean up your mess." A list of coordinates appeared. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Kyle sat down, rubbing his temples. "It means they want us to get rid of the body." My stomach dropped. "You can't be serious. There's no way we're going back there." "Do you think we have a choice?" Kyle snapped. "If we don't do it, they'll come after us. You saw the message in the house." I couldn't argue with him. The image of that man tied to the chair, his throat slit, was burned into my brain, and the words on the wall, "You're next." "We should call the cops," I said weakly. "And tell them what?" Kyle shot back. "That we signed up for some dark web game and killed a guy because they told us to? You think they'll believe us?" I didn't have an answer for that. We drove back to the house just before sunrise. The street was quiet, the kind of eerie calm that only exists in the early hours of the morning. The front door was still unlocked. The smell hit us as soon as we stepped inside, stronger now, almost unbearable. I gagged, covering my nose and mouth with my sleeve. The body was still there, slumped in the chair, the blood on the carpet now dark and congealed. "What do we do?" I whispered. Kyle walked to the kitchen and came back with a plastic tarp and a roll of duct tape. "We wrap him up, load him into the car and dump him." I stared at him. "You've done this before?" "No," he said flatly, "but I've seen enough movies." Wrapping the body was the worst thing I've ever done. The smell, the weight, the way his limbs flopped limply as we moved him. It was too much. I threw up twice, but Kyle just kept working, his face a mask of grim determination. When we were done, we carried the body to the car. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to stop, to run, but I couldn't. I was too far in. We drove out to the woods, to a spot Kyle had picked out on the GPS. It was miles from anywhere, the kind of place no one would stumble across by accident. Kyle grabbed a shovel from the trunk and started digging. I stood there, useless, watching him work. "Hurry up," I said, glancing over my shoulder. "You want to help?" he snapped, his voice raw. I didn't. It took over an hour to dig a hole big enough for the body. By the time we were done, we were both drenched in sweat, our hands blistered and raw. We lowered the body into the hole, covering it with dirt as quickly as we could. When it was done, we stood there in silence, staring at the freshly turned earth. "That's it," I said, my voice hollow. "We're done." Kyle didn't respond. We got back in the car and drove away. When we got back to Kyle's place, the laptop was waiting for us again. The screen was on, a new message glowing in the darkness. "Well done. Task 7 complete. Prepare for Task 8. Kyle slammed the laptop shut and threw it across the room. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't." "Then let's stop," I said. "Let's run." "They'll find us," he said. "They don't have to. We can." The laptop dinged. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. I walked over, picked it up, and opened it. "Task 8. Turn on the TV." "What?" I whispered. Kyle grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment it was just static. Then the image appeared. It was a live feed of my mum's house. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The feed zoomed in, focusing on her bedroom window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a shadow moving behind them. Kyle stood frozen, his face pale. "What the fuck is this?" The laptop dinged again. I looked down at the screen. "Task 8. Finish what you started." And below that, "She's waiting." My world shattered in that moment. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the screen. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. They had my mom. The dark web freaks, the people we'd been trying to appease, to survive, they were in her house. They were watching her. Kyle was pacing, running his hands through his hair. "What do we do?" he kept muttering like a broken record. "What the fuck do we do?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the laptop. The message stared back at me, taunting me. "Task 8. Finish what you started. She's waiting." "What does that even mean?" Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. "They want me to kill her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Kyle stopped pacing and stared at me. "No, no way. You're reading it wrong. There's got to be another way." I shook my head. "You've seen what they do. You've seen what happens when people try to back out. They'll kill her, Kyle. They'll make me watch, and then they'll come for us." He looked away, his jaw clenching. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but there were no good answers, no way out. "They're going to do it anyway," I said, my voice breaking. "No matter what we do." We got in the car. The drive to my mum's house felt like the longest of my life. The streets were empty, the sky just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. My mind kept playing out every horrible scenario, every possible outcome. What if she wasn't alive when we got there? What if they'd already killed her, just to punish me for taking too long? What if this was all a trap, and we were driving straight into our own deaths? Kyle was silent the whole way, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly I thought he might break it. When we pulled up outside my mum's house, everything looked normal. The lights were off, the curtains drawn, the front yard still and quiet. But I knew better. "They're inside," I said. Kyle nodded, swallowing hard. "What's the plan?" "There is no plan," I said, my voice hollow. The front door was unlocked. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it, that same suffocating dread that had been with us since the beginning of this nightmare. The air was heavy, the house deathly silent. I crept through the living room, Kyle close behind me. My hands were sweating, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet made me flinch. We reached the stairs. I looked up, my heart sinking. The hallway at the top was dark, the shadows stretching out like something alive. "Stay here," I whispered to Kyle. "Are you crazy?" he hissed. "I'm not letting you go up there alone." I didn't argue. I couldn't. We climbed the stairs together, moving as quietly as we could. The hallway was just as I remembered it from my childhood, but it felt different now. like the walls were closing in on me. My mum's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Light seeped through the crack, faint and flickering like a candle. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty. At first, I thought we were too late. The bed was unmade, the pillows scattered, but there was no sign of her. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. Where was she? Then I saw it, a camera set up on a tripod in the corner of the room. Its lens was pointed at the bed. "What the fuck is this?" Kyle whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The laptop in my bag dinged. I pulled it out, my hands shaking, and opened it. "Check the closet." I froze. "No," I whispered. Kyle grabbed my arm. "Don't." But I couldn't stop myself. My legs moved on their own, carrying me across the room to the closet. The door was closed, but I could hear something on the other side. A faint wet sound like breathing, but wrong. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't. But I didn't have a choice. I turned the knob and pulled the door open. My mum was inside. She was tied to a chair, her head slumped forward, her hair covering her face. Her arms were limp, her wrists bound with duct tape. "Mom!" I cried, falling to my knees. She didn't respond. Kyle stood behind me, frozen in place. "Is she?" I reached out, my hand shaking, and touched her arm. Her skin was cold. "No," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "No, no, no." Then her head snapped up. Her eyes were black, just like the girls in the house. Her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, her teeth too sharp, too wrong. Before I could react, she lunged at me, snapping her teeth inches from my face. I stumbled back, screaming, as Kyle grabbed a lamp and swung it at her. It shattered against her head, but she didn't even flinch. "We have to go!" Kyle shouted, dragging me to my feet. I didn't need to be told twice. We ran, tearing down the stairs and out the front door. I could hear her behind us, her footsteps heavy, her breathing ragged and wet. We made it to the car, slamming the doors just as she reached us. She pounded on the windows, her face twisted into something that wasn't human. Kyle floored it, and the car screeched away from the house. We didn't stop driving until the sun was fully up. "What the hell was that?" Kyle whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know." The laptop dinged again. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. "Congratulations, task 8 complete. Prepare for task 9. I threw the laptop out the window. Kyle didn't say anything. He just kept driving. We didn't talk about what we'd seen, what we'd done, or what would happen next. I don't know where we're going. I don't know if we'll ever be safe. But one thing is clear. This isn't over. It's never going to be over.